Hi everybody, Joe Brady here. I apologize for the delay. Kind of been off the air for about the past month because I've been traveling constantly. So it's good to be home for a bit and try to catch up. And today what we're going to do is discuss, even though you've got a great day and perfect exposure, that you're still going to have to do some edits on your images to get them back to the way that they look to your eyes. So we want to take an image, take a raw image like this one here, and we're going to transform it using Lightroom. We're just going to use Lightroom's tools today. Now, first of all, let's go up into the Develop module here, and let's take a look first at the histogram. And again, the histogram means left side is pure black, right side is pure white. Now, it's giving us a semi-warning. It's a warning that things are getting close, showing shadow clipping. And if you click on that, it would show it to you in blue. But as I look around, and we can drag around here, I'm not actually seeing any pixels showing up. So that means it's really close to 100% black in some spots. But really, look down here. So not a worry. And on the other side, the white clipping, which is the one that would be really important, is completely blank. There's nothing going to pure white, so that means we're safe. Now, areas like here look like they might be getting close to pure white. And as I put the little hand over here, look up underneath the histogram, and you'll see 98.1, 98, and 96.8. So it's getting close to 100%, meaning pure white, but it's not. So that means we're good with the data. So in essence, what we have up here is a perfect histogram. This is a perfect exposure. It really couldn't be any better, yet it still doesn't look all that hot. And this happens to all of us. It's because of how our cameras capture data and how the raw files are originally brought into software. So be that as it may, we got some work to do on this one. And what we're going to have to do isn't difficult necessarily, but it's going to take a little bit of time because this one's a little bit deep. So let's go to the basic folder first and just do the quick basics. Bring the highlights all the way down. Actually, that looks a heck of a lot better already. And we'll bring the shadows all the way up. Helped a little bit, but nowhere near enough. We'll come back to that. I'm going to go ahead and add some presence now. This will be little fine detail sharpenings. We'll add a little bit of texture, a little bit of clarity. Do we want dehaze? You know what? We're going to hold off on dehaze. We're going to do that locally rather than globally because I don't want things to get kind of too overly crunchy. As far as color goes, it's very desaturated. It was a beautiful warm day here, and all of this was glowing yellow, yet the raw file just pretty much scrubbed that all out. So vibrance is cooler colors. You can see as we bring the vibrance up, if you bring it all the way up, it'll affect everything. But as you start to bring it up, you can see some of the colors starting to come back in. But before we do that, let's do some just saturation. What saturation does is it increases the saturation of all colors equally. So let's bring up a little bit there. I think we're going to save the vibrance for the shadow side. All right, so that quickly, we've gone from there to there. It's a start. But the entire left side of the image is way too dark. Now, by the way, I don't know if this thing is going to be in the way after the crop, but you know what? Let's get rid of it. So let's go to our Remove series and use this tool, which allows us to do the generative AI thing. And let's just draw around this to get rid of it. And we'll click on Remove over here, and it's going to do its AI thing. And it will give us three options to choose from. There's one. Here's the little variation arrows. 1, 2, 3. I think I like 2 best. That looks the most natural. So we'll hit enter on that one. Good, we've got that done. So let's start by selecting the dark side of the image. So we'll create a new mask. We're going to use a brush. And I do want to make sure auto mask is on. So let's go ahead and just get this entire dark part of the image. I'm pretty sure the trees down the bottom are going to get cropped out, so I'm not going to bother with them right now. And just get that entire dark side of the image. In fact, we'll come up into here too. And since we have auto mask on, notice that the circle really doesn't go off into the other areas. All right, now let's bring up the exposure on this and see what that does. Yes, it's going to be flat because it's lacking contrast. We're going to fix that. But let's bring it up so we're starting to get the tone on the far walls of the canyon here. Okay, looking better. Let's put some contrast in to make the darker things a little darker. And I'm going to increase the exposure again a little bit more. Now let's bring in some color. Let's bring, oh, look at that, starting to look better. Let's see, we're going to add some yellow to bring some warmth into that. That's looking better. In fact, it could be a little more saturated. And one of the things I always preach to our people when we're on location shooting is after you've shot, stop. Take a look at the thing you just photographed and kind of burn into your mind's eye what the thing looked like. So what I'm concerned about right now are the canyon walls. So I think it needs a little more saturation, maybe even a little more yellow. Yeah, that's looking better. Okay, we're making progress. So let's continue working on the dark side of the image. What's happened? We've lost all the color and the contrast in the actual pine trees around. So let's create a new mask. Create new mask and choose brush again. Let's get a smaller brush. And this time we're just going to work on the trees. Anywhere there's a clump of these pines, let's go ahead and get them. And you might notice that it goes outside of the trees a little bit. That's actually okay, because remember, it's going to be fading out. Anyway, let's see, is that pines? No, that's just rock. And in fact, we've got it here too. So let's get this grouping. And, oh, we're right along this ridge. Those are all trees. All right, so let's do two things. First, we're going to increase the exposure on these, just temporarily. And then we're going to change the color. So they've lost some of their green. So let's add a little bit of blue, add a little bit of green, just so we can see what we're doing. And now let's dehaze those. And as I see that, I don't like the color we've gotten. And again, the overexposure is just kind of a tool to see what we're doing. They've gone a little too bluey. Let's pull out a little bit of the blue. And now let's increase the contrast. Oh, that's starting to look better. And now we can bring the exposure back down a little bit. Okay, I can live with that. I think that's looking pretty good. So what else? How about the waterfall itself? Well, let's create a new mask. So we'll use the brush. Let's go ahead and select around the waterfall. So the waterfall color, that's kind of a tough one. I don't necessarily want to make it bluer. I don't remember bluer. Let's bring up the exposure a little bit. See, put some little life into the water. That looks pretty good. I'm thinking, strangely enough, it might need some yellow, but let's find out. We'll add some blue. No. Add some yellow. That's too much, but kind of interesting. I think I'm liking that. So let's add a little bit of yellow. And what yellow does also, it doesn't necessarily have to turn things yellow, but it takes the blue out of things. All right, we'll continue on. Now we've got these super bright parts on the right, and the bright side of the image is still undersaturated. So let's go ahead and get another brush, another new mask with a brush. And by the way, I keep going up to the Create New Mask just to show you. You can bypass all of this just by hitting the K key, and that will give you a brush. So let's go ahead and select all this stuff. Again, we have Auto Mask on, so it's only picking up the stuff that I click on. And let's come down in through here and up in here. The trees have a different problem here. They're too light. So we're going to deal with them separately, but let's just deal with the rock now. All right. Oh, we've got some spots here. So what are the problems? This particular area might need some help on its own because it's gone really light. So let's bring down the highlights on that. Oh, that helps a lot already. Let's add a little more yellow. Now it's starting to look like the way I remember it. And we can open up the shadows too. The shadows are a little bit on the dark side. And I think a little more saturation, actually a lot of more saturation, something like about there. All right, we're making progress. What else needs to be done? Because the contrast still isn't there. While we're here, let's do the trees. This time I'm just going to hit the K, and it just gives us a new mask and allows me to select all these trees kind of en masse. In fact, even these up on the upper level above the falls have gotten a little bit too faded. And I think that's pretty much the areas that are a problem. Now, let's undo that. Let's get a smaller brush and just pick a little bit in here. Okay, so what does it need? Contrast. Let's add some contrast. Let's bring down the exposure a little bit. That looks better. And the color, I think, is maybe a little too yellow. I think this might need a little help with blue, just a smidge of blue, and maybe a little more green too. And that's looking pretty good. Okay. Now, the falls is kind of the place where you end up. We've got the river coming up here to the falls. The area around it is still looking kind of flat. So let's hit K again. We're just going to be doing a lot of K here because we want to bring out local areas and add some oomph back into them in areas that got kind of flat. Again, let's come down to effects. Let's add a bunch of texture to this. Let's add some dehaze. Yes, that's going to darken it. That's okay. We'll fix that. Let's add a little bit warmth again. Now we're starting to look better. And maybe a little exposure. Let's bring that up a little bit. Let's see how much we can get away with. You know, if we bring it up that much, then we need some more dehaze. We need a lot of dehaze on this to define it. You know, that's starting to look pretty good. Let's hit enter and look at this full screen for a second. And, you know, could I do more? Yeah, but I think I might be done except for the final crop. Oh, no, strike that. This one area here where we've got this piece of the rock. Yes, everything's really super sharp. And yes, this might have been this bright with the sun hitting it, but it's a distraction, and I don't want the eye to go there. So let's deal with that separately. Let's hit K again. Let's select just these super bright white spots. And I'm going to tone them down a little bit. So I'm going to bring down the highlights and then the exposure. Just enough. They can still be bright, but we don't want them so bright that the brightness is competing with the waterfall itself. Is there any place else we want to deal with? So let's say no for now. And let's do a crop, because this is the other really important part of an image edit that has so much effect on the final impact. So I'm going to hit the R key, which is crop, or you can come to here. I'm not going to worry about using a standard size. I want to crop this to what I think the image needs. So I'm going to come in from the left. I do not want to hit into the river. That's important. So that's about as far as I can come in. I can come in a little off the right, and I'm using the golden ratio grid, by the way, which under Tools, if you go to Crop Guide Overlay, I am using this one. I prefer this for my landscapes. And you can see that's putting the waterfall exactly on the right vertical of the grid. I don't think I need all this stuff down the bottom. Let's see if I'm going to have to get rid of some of these trees down. Yeah, you know what? I think I do. I'm thinking, you know what? Do I like the whole thing? Yeah, maybe. Let's see. Let's do that crop, which I like. Let's see if AI will remove this bit of tree here. Nothing I could do. There was nowhere to go. I'm up on a platform above the canyon. So it is what it is. Sometimes stuff is in the way that you just can't do anything about. So this is kind of a big area. I may not like it and may just crop it off. But let's see what AI can do for us. So let's hit remove and see how clever this thing is. Most of the times it's pretty clever, but we'll see out of the 3 variations it gives us which works. That starts to work, although it really screwed up down here. So 1, let's see, 2, that got a little bit weird. And, 3 looks pretty good. Huh, I think I can live with 3. We're just going to crop a little bit off the bottom. So we'll hit enter on that. And let's hit the R key again. I'm going to take some of it off. I think about that much. And as I do that, there's one little piece sitting right here. I'm going to go to the remove tool, but I'm going to use the standard one this time and just kind of pick that. And that makes a nice clean edit. Do I need to do anything else? Yes. Let's hit enter on this stuff and go down. 2 more things. Effects. Let's add a vignette. Let's darken the edges a little bit, because I got something else in mind after we do that. We're going to do one last bit of brush work. So we hit K again. I'm going to get a nice big brush and turn off auto mask, because what I want to do is create a path of light up to the falls by increasing the exposure right along there a little bit, just a little, just to kind of open it up a bit. And while doing that, I'm going to add some more warmth into it. Oh yes, that looks much better. And I think that's looking pretty good. Let's hit Command apostrophe to create a virtual copy. And I'm going to reset this. And let's go to full screen. So there's the raw file we started with. And we took that from there to there. Could it use even a little bit more? Yes, it would need a little helper program. What's that? You want to see the helper program? Fine. Let's add the last little bit. And as we zoom in, I just wanted to share this with you. This is shot with the OM1 Mark II. And one thing that's great about this camera is it really plays nicely with Lightroom, because you can see as I move around, once it redraws right there, the RAW processor really likes the OM files, because you might have noticed, I haven't done any sharpening on this. And the images come in this crisp. It's really quite amazing. All right, so before we do our helper program, we're going to go to the detail panel. And I'm going to add a little bit more sharpening, but then hold down the Alt key and click on the masking slider. And I'm going to bring this down and drag it over just so that the edges of stuff are actually getting the sharpening. And then we're going to click on denoise, which I had already done. I already done the denoise part. So denoise will get rid of any kind of, like it says, little bit of noise. So now this image, let's click off of these a second. Now this image is ready for the helper program. I'm going to send this into NYX Viveza 3 and hit edit. If you don't have the NYX filters, I highly recommend them. They will add that one last little bit of pop and clarity. It's almost like putting on some Polaroid sunglasses to really open up your images. So yes, there's always an update. So we'll click on later. This is the before after slider, by the way. Let's push that off to the left. And what I'm after are two or three things. First is structure. And look what it just did. Just by doing that, look at the definition and the life it puts into the image. Kind of amazing. Saturation. Let's see if it needs a little more saturation overall. You got very little bit with this. It's like salt and pepper. You can easily overdo it. And then the last one is the warmth slider. Let's just, if we go cool, takes a little bit of life away. If we bring it up, it's too much. Again, just a very little bit. And now look at the before and after slider. See what I said? It is. It's like putting on Polaroid sunglasses and everything all of a sudden gets clearer. Love this software. I would say about 90% of my images get a little bit of the Nick effect when we're done. Now, as I step back and look at the finished image, I really like it. I do have a question, though, that I want to just explore just before we call it on this image edit. Am I happy with this? Yes, it's great. However, I'm curious what would happen if I made it a little bit more contrasty, a little more saturation, and maybe a little more of a crop. So let's try those three things. I'm going to create a virtual copy of that image, and let's go ahead and do it. So the first thing I thought was more contrast. So let's add some contrast to it. Ooh, and you know what? It did need more. I think about right there is a good spot. So let's go with that. I'm going to bring up the exposure just a little bit to open it up. I'm going to add a little more saturation. And what else? Is that it? Maybe a little more warmth. Maybe just a smidge more yellow. And let's look at the difference, but left and right. So before and after, I do like that better. Now let's take a look at the crop. I'm going to bring up the crop. And what happens if we make it just a smidge taller and thinner? I'm going to get a little bit dangerously close. I really don't want to clip the river. I got to make sure that there's a little bit over here. But what happens if we do this? And I think we end up with a more powerful image. So again, let's go to full screen. Here's the original. And just adding that little bit more contrast, a little bit more saturation, a little bit more warmth, and then a slight crop. Look what it does. And it adds a little bit more focus to the image. It's more powerful. The falls got a little bit bigger in the frame because of the crop. And I think that's our final. So there's a good lesson for you. When you think you're done, walk away from the image for a while. Walk away from the edit. Come back to it later. Give it another look and to see if there's one or a couple more things that you can do to really make it perfect. And I think we did that with this one. Just going from there, which was good, pretty good, to that, which I think is pretty great. So that was kind of deep. It took a little bit of time to get to it because there were a lot of individual places to work on. But the concepts are fairly basic. It's just adding some contrast, adjusting color, and spend a little time with this. Again, think of it like cooking in the kitchen. You just got to take your time, follow the recipes, and then you can get there too. That's it for today. Thank you so much for joining me, and I hope to see you online again soon. Till next time, be well. Bye-bye.